You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, ep091. And now, here are Craig and Jeff.
Welcome back to the Tricorder Transmissions, everybody. This is episode number 91. Today we're going to be talking about Gold Key Comics issue number 11, The Brain Shockers. So I know we were off the air last week, so we apologize. We were a little unexpected travel happened and we just couldn't coordinate, but we're back online this week. So this is, as always, we are your host, Jeff Hewlett.
And Craig Cohen.
And Craig, how's everything going out there in sunny Las Vegas?
Good. It's surprisingly chilly here at night. It's been dropping down into the low 50s, and by early morning, you might find it in the high 40s. So a little bit chilly, but still loving it. Really, really enjoying the change of pace in my life.
Yeah, the Vegas lifestyle setting in.
Yes. And before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I know before the next episode airs, we would have celebrated Thanksgiving. So I want to wish you and yours a happy Thanksgiving and a happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners.
Yeah, same to you, Craig. Thank you very much for that. And of course, I echo the sentiment for all of our listeners out there in listener land. Thanks for sticking with us as long as you have. And we look forward to ringing in the new year with everybody. So as we said before, we are talking about Gold Key Comics issue number 11 today, The Brain Shocker. So this issue came out in August of 1971, and this is another one by famous comic author Len Wein. Mm-hmm. The artist is still Alberto Giolitti, so we've had the same artist again, and cover price 15 cents. Star date, the starting star date, this issue actually has two star dates in it. The starting star date is 11/26.1. And I was a little surprised to see, Craig, we made a big deal out of this in a couple previous episodes, but the space floating book is back.
Yes.
The Captain's Log book. So it disappeared mysteriously, and now it's back. So in case you're just tuning in and you haven't heard us talk about this before, so some of the comics have a physical Captain's Log. It's a book, and it's just open and floating in outer space with the Captain's Log written on it. So it just seems to be randomly there and then not there. This time, it reads, Captain's Log, started 11/26.1. We've established orbit around planet Pollux 2 to investigate the strange disappearance of several spaceships in this vicinity recently. So a little similarity to some of the prior issues at another planet that they're investigating, another orbiting and checking things out. So, Craig, before we jump into the actual meat of the issue, you have any thoughts on the Captain's Log or the cover?
I love seeing the illustrated cover again. And, with the pictures of Spock and Kirk, like the promo pictures up in the corner, mm-hmm. kind of ruin the cover a little bit. But still, I am all for these fully comic book style illustrated covers. They make you want to crack open the issue.
Agreed. This is, I think, the second one in a row where we finally get, proper issue-specific covers where we just had promo shots of either the crew or the ship before. Now we have a cover where Kirk and Spock are trying to hold a door closed where these monstrous-looking spirit-type things are coming out. And there's a unidentified blonde crewman running away. So I guess we're going to see some
with pants.
With pants underneath the skirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that was an intentional thing or if that was just the way the colors of the comic worked out. But it is interesting. I think there's a couple of females in the comic, so we'll get into that a little bit more as we go. I think Uhura has the same type of thing going on later.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So as we always do, we're going to give you guys a 3 count before we start talking about the spoilers or the issue itself. So feel free to pause us or stop us if you want to read the comic first. and then pick us up later to hear us talk about it. So we're going to be starting to talk about the issue in 3, 2, 1. So as the captain's log said, they are in orbit around Pollux 2, and the issue starts out with Spock giving a report that the ship is now in orbit, and he's beginning a sensor probe of the surface of the planet to look for any of those disappearing ships or wreckage or debris. At just that point, McCoy shows up on the bridge and asks to speak to Captain Kirk because he's feeling that the amount of shore leave that the crew has gotten lately has not been enough, and there are some notable absences from the shore leave logs, and he is afraid that the work on the ship is going to suffer because the bridge crew has not been taking their recommended shore leave. So especially Spock, Scotty, and Kirk are called out specifically. So just then another interruption happens. A yeoman by the name of Trask, another female yeoman who looks a little like Janice Rand with a different hairdo, interrupts Kirk to ask him to sign a requisition form for something called plastowels for a rec room on the ship. So Kirk does so and notes that she can go find those towels down on a lower level of the ship. Just as that's happening, Spock reports that he's detected a small area of power on the planet's surface, and that power is starting to rise as if some sort of an attack is imminent. He activates the force screen, and they are attacked with several blasts that last a few minutes, but thanks to the shields, the damage is minor. So we cut down to the lower level of the ship. We find Yeoman Trask is on level 7, getting her plastowels, and was knocked down and hit her head during the attack. As she comes to her feet, she spots a door that she has never noticed before. There's a sign on the door that says, "Caution, do not open, off limits." Of course, she decides to open the door, and when she does, she is surrounded by these dark, cloudy spirits rushing out of the door and knocking her unconscious. So I think that's a good place to stop, as a lot has happened here. It's two conflicting storylines, of course, the disappearing ships on the planet and these weird spirits that live on the Enterprise behind a locked door. So, Craig, what do you think about the fact that they're going to this Pollux 2 planet? We've made a lot of discussion on our prior episodes about the comics being more about exploration than the show was, but here we are now. They're doing some investigative work as opposed to exploratory work.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. It's a neat change of pace. Not to deviate too far from your line of questioning, but I question the reason for the whole McCoy Kirk interrogation, and wonder if it's just set up to really excuse the poor handling of this very, very important door.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that. I wasn't really sure, not to jump ahead in the issue too much, but I wasn't really sure what purpose McCoy's interruption served either. But it wasn't. I didn't necessarily think it was to cover to lead into the door thing. It just seemed like, maybe it's one of those things where if it was the length of a show, it was an hour long or 50-something minute long TV episode, they could have used this, everybody's too tired and they're starting to lose their focus, as an explanation for their weird behavior that's coming up, instead of jumping right to the fact that they're being manipulated by an alien, or they've been inhabited by spirits. So it could have been one of those investigative things where Bones and Spock had to figure out exactly what was causing it all.
Yeah. I mean, I do like that character moment for Bones. And again, I really think it, at least for me as a reader, it sort of excused the captain sort of absentmindedly sending this yeoman down to this floor that really should be probably on lockdown, or at least have guards stationed at the door.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up in a minute, that the caution sign I don't think is adequate to dissuade someone from opening that door, because what was behind the door really should have been something that was on lockdown or behind some sort of a force field, or like you said, have an armed guard posted there. Yeah, it just seems a little bit, especially because later on we learn that what was in the room was actually contained differently, and what exactly those things were. And I would think that they were more, those things are very precious. So yeah, there's a whole lot of speculation we could do about why there's not adequate amount of security on that.
Yeah.
But definitely a good point. Page 3, panel number 2, we're seeing some shots that look a lot like the bridge. So not the mechanical space we've seen them sitting in before, right? It looks a little more like the bridge. Kirk has a chair that's kind of similar. Let's see, what else? Oh, Yeoman Trask says her name is Dory. Kind of remind me of Finding Nemo there.
Yes.
So Dory Trask. We later on find out her full name. So I just thought it'd be bear mention that her name. She says her name is Dory, but we find out that's a nickname. And I like the fact that she's asking for plast towels, whatever plast towels are supposed to be. Are they plastic towels?
Yeah, I guess that seems to be a popular word in this issue, because later on we'll get the plast dome.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, good call. Yeah, Spock finds the plast dome.
Yeah.
So I guess, are the towels made of the same material as the dome? If so, what use are they?
Yeah.
How do they dry anything?
Yeah, it doesn't seem really green.
No.
And also, why would there be a requisition form for something that's already on the ship?
Yeah.
Like how are they managing that inventory?
Yeah, I wonder if you need the captain's signature to get them out of the storage room, if they have some sort of a stockroom management system.
Yeah.
That they need captain. And that's obviously they're a very important thing. Not like he's got to sign off on things like photon torpedoes and phasers being checked out as security, but he also has to sign on something like toilet paper and paper towels. So I get, he may need some sort of an administrative assistant or something.
Totally.
On the ship to help out with that. You would think there'd be some sort of facility manager.
Yes.
On the ship, but well, at least we know that they store the plast towels on level 7 of the ship.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of farther down, but one other note for this section is that when Spock calls for the shields to be raised, he calls them the force screen.
Oh, right.
So still terminology, still not all the way there. We seem to be wavering a bit on the terminology. So anything else on this first section before we move on you want to bring up?
No, I mean, as a reader, it was fun trying to figure out where they were going, because it's so rare to get this, this many storylines sort of converging.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and again, these issues are so short. They don't always have the time to flesh out all of the directions that they wanted to go. And I think this issue may suffer because of that, because there's so many more twists and turns they could have entered into this story, but because of the limited space, it makes it difficult to pull that off. This could have been an episode of the show for sure.
Oh, yeah, totally.
All right, so moving along. We are on the bridge. Spock is scanning the ship and reports that there are no injuries that he sees, but and he starts to investigate where the blasts came from on the planet's surface. The spiritual beings that freed themselves or were freed from the room on level 7 have kind of flown up through the ventilation ducts and wound up coming onto the bridge, but they are invisible, so nobody sees them except us, of course. And they kind of take over the bodies or they absorb themselves into the bodies of the bridge crew. So Uhura attempts to contact the planet, but is not able to get anything. And Spock confirms the reports that all the crew members are okay, except for Yeoman Trask, who cannot be located. So Kirk notes that she was sent down to the 7th level to get the plast towels, and Kirk and Spock kind of glance at each other with a sort of an uh-oh look on their faces, and Kirk tears off to go down to find her, knowing full well what she could have stumbled onto. So he finds her waking up on the floor. He contacts Spock on the bridge and tells him they must have a conference with McCoy to come clean about what was in the room, and they can't keep it a secret from him anymore. So they have a quick meeting in sickbay where Spock goes into a bit of backstory on Vulcan and how they banish their emotions and change their philosophy to be based on logic rather than emotion. So we've heard this story before, but uh, in this version, there's a little bit of an extra added twist that I don't recall ever hearing about before. So this may be something the comics took a little liberty with. As they were trying to purge emotion, one of the things that they tried was a device that would remove the emotion from them and I guess bottle it.
Mm-hmm.
But they found that that was not a good way to go because it also seemed to remove some of their soul with it. So they scrapped that and instead decided to use a completely mental discipline of following the teachings of logic. So, but during that process, the bottled emotions from ancient Vulcan ancestors had been preserved. So the people who went through the process, they stayed that way. And apparently the bottles from thousands of years ago survived and are now in the cargo hold of the Enterprise that is on a mission to transfer them to a shrine on a planet called Beta 4. And the recent attack on the ship must have loosened or broken the bottles and allowed the emotions of the ancient Vulcans to escape onto the ship. So that's a lot to process. So we'll stop here and talk a little bit more about this. So I guess we'll tackle the big topic first, and that is the Vulcan history rundown. And I know we've heard a lot of that stuff before, but I find it interesting that the writer chose to take a little bit of a liberty with the Vulcan history story and add that bit of extra stuff in there about the emotion machine and putting their emotions and souls in bottles.
Yeah, I mean, as a Star Trek fan, I hated it.
Yeah.
But as a reader of the Gold Key comics, I kind of loved it and appreciated the fact that they really ventured out into this new continuity.
I agree. I think it's really interesting that the writer cared enough to take the Vulcan backstory and instead of just running with it verbatim, he added a little bit of extra stuff in there and made it an interesting thought or an interesting storyline for the comic, so that we're getting a little bit something different than what we'd heard before and not just regurgitating the same storyline we'd heard about Vulcan's history before and after the show, actually.
Right.
So one thing I do have a bit of an issue with, though, not necessarily with the changing of Vulcan history or the addition of that piece, but these souls or the emotions were removed from these bodies thousands of years ago or a long time ago. Why are they just now putting them on a shrine on another planet? And why are they utilizing the Enterprise to do it? And why were they stored on the ship, for maybe someday making it to the shrine? Wouldn't it be something where we have these precious, ancestral souls? These are very important people. Vulcan, you would think they would transfer them immediately. It would be a priority mission to get them from one place to the other, not just kind of meander around the galaxy with them.
Yeah, that was a huge plot hole for me. And I'm glad you addressed it because for me, it was just something I was like, did I miss something here? Or why isn't this making sense?
It does. It really doesn't make sense. And I can't think of a way to explain it that would make it any better. I mean, I even tried to go so far in my own mind as to make up extra parts, like they originally had them on a shrine somewhere on Vulcan and they wanted to move them somewhere. And, they called in Spock as a favor because they couldn't afford the shipping. I don't know. It just seems like a large risk to take to put those on a Federation ship. And you would think as Vulcans have ships of their own.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why wouldn't the Vulcans just fly them where they needed to go? And why would you put the shrine on another planet?
I know. There's so many problems.
Yeah, I don't know. All right, well, this is one of those times if any of the listeners want to chime in on this one, that would be kind of cool because we're kind of having a tough time reconciling this. So let's see, what else? I also found it kind of strange that Kirk and Spock knew what was in that room, but McCoy didn't. I mean, it doesn't seem to me like, I mean, they were originally bottled up, right? I mean, they were not harmful. They're precious cargo. I mean, wouldn't it I don't see why they would have needed to hide that from anybody. You know, once if it was just a room full of evil spirits and if you open the door it would take over the ship, maybe then you want to hide it so nobody gets the idea to open it up. But still, you know, you'd think this is precious cargo and it's a pretty important mission to carry those things to this shrine. You would think that people would need to be informed of exactly what's being carried in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, well. Another one for the listeners, if you want to chime in on that one. Page 8, panel 1. Uhura is name dropped there, and we see a woman there who I guess is supposed to be Uhura, but her facial color is off, and it appears that she's wearing some sort of pants under the skirt. So that was a little bit off-putting. So I'm starting to think that maybe the pants are intentional.
Yeah.
Or the leggings or whatever. And it's during the sequence where we find out that Dory Trask is actually Pandora Trask. So, haha, she opened the door. It's like Pandora's stockroom.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So obvious, but I actually missed that on the nose reference.
Yeah, that one hit me on the nose. Like, what was it? There was one of the, I don't know if you've seen any of the Harry Potter movies, but yes. I don't want to go too off the trail here, but the one where the guy turns out to be a werewolf, you know, but his name was Lupin. Come on. Come on. I mean, that was smack across the face. Like, you couldn't tell that guy, you know, you couldn't tell that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Anyway, sorry. Moving. Anything to add about this section before we move on?
No.
All right. So Kirk tells McCoy and Spock to search out the emotions and put them back in the bottle. So that's a pretty tall order. They're not quite sure exactly how they're going to do that, and McCoy is questioning how they could possibly even begin to do that. It's like a needle in a haystack type of thing. Spock is determined to do it. So Kirk, Scotty, Sulu, and Chekov, who is named finally. Yes. This is the first time he is named in the comic. Beam down to the surface of Pollux 2, and in an effort to find the source of the laser blasts that rocked the Enterprise. So they beam down. Kirk and Scotty find themselves alone. So Sulu and Chekov are separated from them somehow. And let's see. A voice booms over their heads, coming from seemingly nowhere, welcoming them to the planet and knowing their names. So this is another one of those instances where the alien knows who they are. And they decide to go and look for Sulu and Chekov, and are they not really able to locate them. So during their search, they hear some rustling in some bushes, and Kirk whips out his phaser and is about to fire when he realizes that it is McCoy and Spock who have beamed down because they were not able to contact Kirk or Scotty on their communicators. The communicators somehow have been disabled. So Spock also says that the emotions are nowhere to be found on the Enterprise. So either they escaped or they're really good at evading the sensors. And just then they come across a huge monster that looks kind of like a giant gorilla, sort of. And their phasers, of course, have no effect on it whatsoever. Spock suddenly, surprisingly actually, panics and runs away. And the beast, I guess, is annoyed by the phasers and trods off through the woods. But Spock has fled and is running away, which is very uncharacteristic of him. So let's take a short break here because this is the end of part 1 of the comic book. So let's see here. So page 11, the transporter room looks pretty close to the real transporter room, I think.
Yeah, good catch.
So no more of those weird oval-shaped things in the background, at least for this issue. It's a little close. You see the discs on the ceiling, so it looks like they're taking some more cues from the show. And I think panel 3 on page 11, to me, was a pretty cool shot. There's a shot of them beaming down to the planet, and there's some jungle foliage in there, but they have this bright yellow burst behind them. I think it looked like a really cool, colorful panel to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So pretty neat artwork there. Once again, the aliens on the planet know who the crew of the Enterprise is without any prior knowledge whatsoever.
Yeah.
A lot of convenience here, and this happens on the show a lot too. And it's almost inexplicable. I mean, do these aliens scan the computer records on the Enterprise? I mean, do they have some sort of a way to monitor cameras on the ship to learn people's names? I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. Apparently, the Enterprise computer system has a terrible firewall.
Ah, they should take some cues from Battlestar Galactica, where they disabled the networking on the ship so that the computers wouldn't be hackable by the enemies. Maybe we should slingshot around the sun and go tell Kirk to enable that. So I love the fact that Chekov is name dropped here.
Yes.
Sulu as well. You actually see Sulu. So there's a page later on where you see someone who I think is supposed to be Chekov, but he's not actually named as such, and nobody talks to him. It's just him. So I'm wondering if that was actually him, but this is definitely the first time we've seen Chekov referenced in the comics. So we finally got everybody included. So last time it was everybody but Chekov, right?
Yeah.
It was the entire season 1 crew. So now we have entire season 2 crew, except Nurse Chapel, I don't think. Hasn't been in there yet, but
yeah.
So pretty cool. Page 12, Scotty's bad accent again.
I know.
And again, he's blonde. So a little bit of consistent for the comics, but inconsistent for the show. And the more I think about it, I'm thinking maybe they should have just written Scotty's dialogue normally and let us imagine the Scottish accent, or let us read it in the Scottish accent instead of trying to write it.
Oh yeah, totally. I one of my favorite writers, Elmore Leonard, he had an article that he published called 10 Rules of Writing. I don't remember if it was from that or not, but he basically said, as a writer, never really try and do accents. He just said, in terms of writing as a tool, it was cheap, and took away the ability for the reader to create voices or whatever. I mean, I could go either way. In the Gold Key comics, Scotty's voice has been really, really annoying for me.
Yeah, me too. I agree. I think that advice is very, very sound, because if I'm Scottish guy and I'm reading a comic, I'm probably reading the comic in an accent in my head, right? I'm applying the accent to the words, right? Yes. I don't necessarily need to read the accent, but let's see. Familiar mechanic from the show. The technology is disabled. Phasers and communicators are not working. So cool to see some familiar tropes from the show being reused over and over again. So more similarities are always good. Yeah, a little convenient, of course. I mean, would be nice if the phasers actually. Well, the phaser works later. Yeah. Anyway, don't want to get ahead of myself. And I guess we'll get to the big one here. Spock runs away, and while he's running away, McCoy is yelling insults at him, calling him a coward and all sorts of other stuff. And it continues into part 2. I have some actual quotes written down when we get through the first part of a part 2, but part 1 ends with a terrified Spock running through the jungle foliage and McCoy screaming insults at him, which I thought was really odd.
Yeah, I loved it though.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. It was a good. Well, Scotty starts laughing at it at the beginning of part 2, so it's kind of a building on the relationship that they have already, right? So this is kind of McCoy letting out his frustrations that he has with Spock. But so any more thoughts on the conclusion of part 1 of the comic before we move forward?
No, but I did kind of like the bulk of the away team. At least it seems like they came down with a sizable one, although it's I know they've done it in the comics before and they did it on the show, but having Kirk and Spock go down together is always makes me nervous.
Oh, me too. But this time, all of the bridge crew, with the exception of Uhura, right, is down on the planet now. So all of the main characters. So who's in charge of the ship right now?
Oh, good question.
Rank wise, would it be Uhura or would it be? I don't even know because Scotty's down on the planet.
Yeah.
Sulu, Chekov, Spock, and Kirk, and Dr. McCoy
Yeah.
are all down there. If everybody died, what the hell?
Yeah. I don't know.
That's disaster waiting to happen. There's got to be some protocol that's being broken here. Gotta be. I mean, who's flying this ship? Sulu and Chekov are on the planet, so they have people subbing in. The B Squad. Yeah. So, all right. So part 2. Again, same name as part 1. Some of the older comics had a separate title for the second part, but in this one, part 2 is still the Brain Shockers. But we start out with another captain's log, and this time the stardate has changed a little. So it's captain's log stardate 1126.8. So we've moved 0.7 in stardates. So, and it reads, while in orbit around planet Pollux 2, a surprise attack from the surface has accidentally released bottled emotions of the Vulcan founders and set them loose on the Enterprise. Upon beaming down to investigate the attack, First Officer Spock has lost control of himself for the first time and panicked. So I don't think that this is the first time Spock has lost control of himself, but I guess in the comic it is.
Yeah.
So not taking into account any of the episodes of the show where Spock got a little bit angry. So Spock vanishes into the undergrowth. McCoy still yelling after him. Kirk tries to quiet McCoy, telling him to shut up, but McCoy does not. So Kirk actually punches McCoy in the face. Scotty begins to laugh hysterically. Kirk begins to approach Scotty, and all three grab their heads in pain. So McCoy, here's a tie back to that initial storyline that McCoy brought up. McCoy attributes it to it being overwork because they haven't had enough leave time and everybody's overtired. So they kind of pull themselves together and go out in search of Mr. Spock. So in another part of the jungle, we see Spock wondering why his emotions got away from him. And as he's kind of strolling around, he comes across a small machine inside of a giant plastic or glass dome. A little small guy, humanoid guy, sitting in a chair with a strange helmet on his head and what looked like kind of almost like fly eyes or spider eyes. Yeah, some kind of weird hatched eyes. Introduces himself telepathically as Maylock. He tells Spock that he is immortal and that he hasn't let anybody enter his dome in 5,000 years. He's been sitting there by himself, and because he's immortal, he's seen and done all kinds of things across the universe, but has gotten bored because he ran out of stuff to do, I guess. So he built this jungle maze on this planet and this computer machine system in order to capture passing spaceships and put people in strange situations that will amuse him so he can live vicariously through the emotional experiences of others. So Spock is a little bit upset by this and tells them that he is not going to allow them to continue doing this. And just as that happens, another large monster comes out of the jungle and begins to chase Spock around. He's panicking once again at the sight of this monster, and Maylock cracks up laughing, a telepathic laugh. And as Spock gets away, he stops to struggle with his emotions, which culminates in a pretty cool scene, so which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
He continues running through the jungle after getting his composure, finds Scotty, McCoy, and Kirk, and leads them back to Maylock's little enclosure. But as they get closer, they are overcome by Maylock's telepathic powers. Spock notices that the other members of the landing party are under a spell. So Spock is free, but he pretends like he's under the spell as well as to not give away his advantage. And at Maylock's signal, all of the emotions rise to the surface and the crew begins to fight with each other. And Maylock is overcome by the experience, absorbing all of these emotions. Spock is able to slip away, runs behind the dome, and cuts a hole in it with his phaser. So he climbs inside and messes with some of the wires, and the machinery malfunctions and allows the emotions to come out. So we will stop here and roll back over some of this. So McCoy yelling at Spock. There were some pretty interesting quotes here. One is he calls Spock a wretched, pointy-eared dog, and another one is he calls me a rotten coward. I knew you were yellow.
Yes.
I knew you were yellow. That was back on page 15 of the comic. So I haven't heard anybody call somebody else yellow except on TV. I don't think I've ever heard it in my real life.
Yeah.
Before. It seems like in one of those old West type things, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, you're yellow.
Yeah, wasn't that in Back to the Future 3?
Instead of chicken.
Yeah.
Because Marty's weakness was being called chicken, but I guess his grandfather's or great grandfather's weakness was being called yellow, which is the equivalent of being called chicken in the Old West, and apparently in the future in Star Trek. But I guess McCoy is a quote unquote country doctor, so maybe yellow makes sense.
Yeah, I loved, again, we were talking about voices. I was totally able to create that voice in my head of McCoy yelling after Spock, which I thought was really cool. That voice seemed to fit the words that they were putting, in his mouth.
I like that. I didn't think of it that way, but now that I'm thinking back on it, you're right. It does seem very McCoyish because there's so many emotional outbursts we've seen from McCoy on the show. I think we're familiar enough with what they sound like to kind of put the two together. Yeah, it does sound like something he would have done if this situation were happening on the show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool. The crew fighting with each other, being influenced by these emotions, these spirits, kind of reminded me a little bit of the Naked Time.
Yes.
Yeah, except Sulu doesn't have a sword and he's wearing a shirt. So if Sulu had a sword and wasn't wearing a shirt, I think it would have been really a missed opportunity for something cool. But I like some of these moments in the comics that remind me of moments on the television show.
Right. Yeah. No, agreed.
Yeah. So the name Maylock makes me go right back to Baylock, right?
Oh, totally. Same for me. I actually had to take a minute to think and say, is this another recycled name? And then realize that it wasn't.
The little guy almost kind of looks like a little Clint Howard, though, just with bug eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought maybe he kind of looked a little like him, but he's very human. And I have to say, I'm glad that they didn't opt for another, human-sized bald white guy.
Yeah.
As the villain in this one. He's a little bald, bug-eyed guy. He looks like a little munchkin or something, or a gnome.
Yeah, I guess the artist was feeling a little adventurous.
Yeah, getting a little bit away from some of the stuff we've seen prior, which is good. And page 21 is a full pager, and this is the Spock struggling with his emotion. I really like this, the layout of the page. I like the artwork. I like the flames, the swirling flames drawn on the background of that page. It really captured to me the Spock's struggle.
Oh, that whole panel was exceptional.
Yeah, I think that's the best artwork in the issue, I think.
Yeah, and it's one of those moments that if you had seen it on the show, you'd say, what a great moment for Leonard Nimoy to really let loose and explore the Spock character. And that's the equivalent of what's going on in this comic book panel. Exactly.
It reminds me of the moments on the show where he was doing just that. So it's that's what makes the Spock character so great. And I'm really glad that Len Wein, the writer, and the artist, Alberto, really kind of came together to make that come through really well in the comic.
Right.
So excellent. Spock, again, the phaser suddenly mysteriously works, and he's able to cut through the dome with his phaser, which I always thought was kind of cool, cutting your way through something with a phaser. It was a pretty neat mechanic, and I like they do the same thing in Star Wars with lightsabers, and you cut through doorways and metal walls with your lightsaber. So I like the fact that these weapons are so versatile. Like, if we have a regular handgun, you're not gonna cut a giant hole in a wall with a handgun, but you have a nice laser beam. You can do some good cutting with that. So
right,
pretty cool. It looked like it kind of melted it in a way too. So pretty neat. Any thoughts to share before we get to the closing?
No, I mean it's kind of interesting to see how Spock sort of rectifies things.
Yeah,
For me, it was a little bit underwhelming, I want to say.
yeah, I he just kind of mixed up a couple of wires. I think this is another one of those pacing issues.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the comic, because they spent a lot of time on things that maybe they could have spent less time on, and they could have used that reclaimed time to focus more. But like I said, it's such a short comic, and this is still, I guess, back where it had to be compartmentalized into one issue and not. It couldn't be, like modern comics have, 4 or 5, 6 issue story arcs.
Yeah.
Modern day Trek comics are much, much longer and span many more issues. But I guess, back then it just wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the story would have been better if it was, 2 issues instead of 1. But
Yeah.
it's a shame. But I guess maybe I'm wondering down the road. I haven't read ahead, so I don't know if Gold Key actually does split any stories up between multiple issues. We'll find out
Yeah, we'll have to see.
down the road. Yeah. All right. So getting towards the end here, the crew composes themselves after a moment of Spock thinking that they were dead, but they're actually okay. And they notice Malok is going through all sorts of ranges of emotions, and the escaped Vulcan ancestors' emotions have entered him, and he's experiencing them over and over and over again. So all of the Vulcan spirits are now in one single body. I guess the machine and the way that the machine pulled the emotional experiences from its victims and put them into Balok gave the alien some kind of a conduit into which they could enter Malok's mind. So that's the end of that, and the Enterprise landing party beams back up and begins to discuss the situation, deciding that it's best to leave the Vulcan emotions where they are, rather than trying to recollect them and take them to the shrine on Beta 4. And that's where they leave it. And that is the end of the comic. And I have a huge issue with that.
Well, yeah, because it doesn't seem like that's a decision they should have been able to make.
Not at all. And I cannot see the Vulcan Council of Elders being very happy with that decision, and basing it solely on a Sarek's reaction to Kirk leaving Spock's body on Genesis when he died.
Yeah.
Sarek was pretty pissed, although it was an unemotional piss, but he was very displeased. And that was his son. Imagine, these are architects of Vulcan society. I mean, this is the captured essences of those people who are very important, and they were supposed to be in a shrine. I can't imagine that this isn't going to be some sort of an intergalactic incident between the Enterprise crew and Vulcan.
Oh yeah, wow, that's an excellent point.
But yes, I think they went a little too far there. But so thoughts on the wrap up of this? How do you feel about the end of the story? I kind of felt that it wrapped up quickly.
Yeah, same here. It seemed like I think it's been the case with a bunch of these gold keys. They create this really interesting premise, but then sort of cheat on the way out.
Agreed. Yeah, and again, probably another byproduct of the shortness of the issues. But getting on to our non-canon essential voting, I think for all of my problems with this issue, I think because it's the first appearance of Chekov in the comic, I'm going to have to give it a thumbs up essential vote. I have serious reservations about it because of some of the other things. The change in Vulcan history canon, a little bit strange, but because it's the first appearance of Chekov, I think I have to go essential.
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, the first appearance, but then also the change of that Vulcan continuity for me makes it essential, because it's the Gold Key comics sort of establishing their place in a universe.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a really great point. So, if you were to look at these comics as Trek canon, I mean, they were authorized by Paramount, right? So it's interesting to think about this universe continuing on with, the blessings of the studio. They're writing in all these little changes that just get disregarded down the road.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see if anything that was done in Gold Key Comics ever shows up in later Trek series, kind of like some of the animated series stuff did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But all right, so we got a double essential. There's a lot of essential Gold Keys in a row here. So, all right, so I guess we're closing out. That brings us to the end of episode 91 of the Tricorder Transmissions, and we will be back next week with our next issue of Gold Key Comics. Thanks as always for tuning in. Craig, I think we should take a minute to do a little bit of a plug here, because I think next weekend is a pretty significant weekend for one of our other shows. So with the release of a new movie in the Rocky franchise coming out, that's a huge moment for the Sly cast. So if you're a Sylvester Stallone fan, go and check out our other show, the Sly Cast. There's a link to it on our Tricorder Transmissions website. So we'll be doing some Creed focused discussion very soon, I think, right?
Yeah. It's been amazing to see the excitement surrounding the release of this film. It's really been awesome to follow. And now looking at some of the non-spoiler related reviews, it seems like this movie is really being well received by critics, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. But anytime a Rocky movie is getting the nods from critics, it's a good sign.
I agree. I've been trying to avoid the spoilers myself, but anxiously reading some of these high score reviews. So I'm very happy to hear that there's a good chance this movie is going to be great. I'm looking forward to seeing it next weekend.
Yeah, on.
So keep an eye on the Sly cast in the near future if you're a Sly fan. I don't know how many Trek fans intersect with Sly fans, and I guess that's about it for this edition of the Tricorder Transmissions. You can find us on Twitter at TTT_pod, Facebook / the Tricorder Transmissions, and our own website, thetricordertransmissions.com. And I'll talk to you next week, Mr. Cohen.
All right. Take care.